So the risk management process. So this is a 3-phase process. So we need to, in phase 1, we're going to look at disruption, scanning, and monitor. So basically, we're looking for the risk to happen. Phase 2, we're going to assess that risk. So our risk exposure is the probability of that risk times the consequence of the risk. So if there's a 90% chance that it's going to happen and it's going to cost $1 million, our risk exposure might be $900,000. And then our mitigation in phase 3. How are we going to prevent this risk from happening, and how are we going to recover from it if it does? So let's go over phase 1. So we need to identify the risk and monitor for the risk. So what are some risks that can happen? What can go wrong? So we can use benchmarking and process mapping. Process mapping for, let's say, an internal risk, let's say in a manufacturing process, this is great because you can look at it and say, what could possibly go wrong at this stage? What can go wrong here? What can go wrong there? What can go wrong at this point? It's great for this process mapping. But risk monitoring. So you're monitoring internally and externally. So let's say you see a hurricane coming towards the east coast of the United States, and you're in Florida. Well, by watching the news and watching the Weather Channel and such, you can see this risk coming. And you're going to be able to see how it's changing. Is it just a tropical storm, or is it a hurricane, hurricane level 5, which is the highest level of hurricanes? Well, you might do different things based on how that risk is changing. So how are you going to prepare to deal with the risk if it comes? That hurricane might die off in the ocean and you just have a rain for a day or two. Or it might come through and destroy 90% of what's on the ground. What's your plan to deal with this risk? And what are you doing to prepare for it? These are all things to start thinking about. So here we have phase 2, our disruption assessment. So we need to look at a risk heat map. And this can be something simple as the likelihood of the risk happening. So it might be highly likely, likely, possible, unlikely, and rare. And then we need to look at the impact of the risk. So we have trivial, minor, medium, major, and severe. So when you look at these, they're color coded. So we have green all the way down in rare and trivial, and then all the way up in severe and highly likely, it gets into the red. Well, how likely is that risk to happen? And how severe will the impact likely to be? Well, if I was to start making plans for these, I would start looking at the biggest impacts and the highly likely ones to happen. Because those are going to be the ones that are going to impact you the most. The ones that are in the rarely going to happen and trivial impact, yeah, you can make plans for those, but that's going to be at the end when you've already made plans for all the other ones. So let's look at phase 3, the mitigation. So we have prevention and recovery. So most areas have an emergency operations center in their county and in the state. Some share it with other counties, they're going combined, but they're looking at prevention and the recovery. So what level of risk are we prepared to live with? So if we're in our hometown, are you prepared to live with the risk of an earthquake happening at any time? Is that something your company will accept? Or does your company say, okay, we can't live with this, we're going to move our company? And how prepared are we to deal with each type of disruption? Do we have the assets in place? So if we have a natural disaster, the fire department's ready for it, the police department's ready for it, the emergency medical services are prepared for it. We have volunteer organizations that are ready to deal with it. So we have a lot of stuff that's prepared, but hopefully we do some prevention and we don't have that. But in the inevitable case that we do, we need to start working through it and then get to the recovery. So we have our risk acceptance pyramid. So most of them, they're going to have acceptable risks. Then we're going to have some tolerable, and then we have at the very top of the pyramid, can't live with. These are ones that we're going to do everything we can to avoid. If that means we need to relocate, we will relocate. So only your company and yourself can determine this, but there's a lot of guidance out there and there's a lot of resources to help with this process. So I hope that this risk management process helps you in evaluating your own level of risk that you would accept and what you plan for. And you can get all the way to this mitigation and you realize that, well, all of these are acceptable, or these are acceptable and I got one that's tolerable. So hopefully you don't have any risks that you can't live with. So that's the risk management process. So let's talk about the failure mode and effects analysis, which is one of the things that we can really analyze each risk in our next video.